Rod Stewart. What if the biggest lesson from a 50-year career in music had nothing to do with the music at all? That's the question at the heart of one of Rod Stewart's more reflective moments away from the stage. Forget the sold-out arenas, the platinum records, the decades of chart-topping hits. When Stewart sits back and really thinks about what shaped him, his mind doesn't drift to trophies or headlines. It drifts to people. 7 of them, to be exact. And the story of who they are, and why they mattered, says more about a life well lived than any greatest hits compilation ever could. Stewart has talked openly about this over the years, and the theme keeps coming back. Success fades. Records end up gathering dust on a shelf. Awards get shoved in a cupboard somewhere. But the people who shape you, they stick around forever, whether they know it or not. Before he was Rod Stewart, global superstar, he was just a skinny kid from North London, kicking a football against a wall, dreaming bigger than his surroundings had any right to let him. Music gave him a way out, but according to Stewart himself, it wasn't just talent or ambition that got him there. It was the people he looked up to along the way. Some of them he met, some he never did. A couple of them taught him things without ever knowing his name. That's the strange thing about admiration, isn't it? It doesn't require a handshake. Sometimes just watching how someone carries themselves is enough to change the way you see the world. It's a striking thing to hear from someone who's spent decades being asked about the songs, the tours, the records that sold millions, the nights that supposedly changed everything. Interviewers want the highlight reel. Stewart, these days, seems far more interested in the people standing just off to the side of it. And it makes sense, in a way. Fame has a strange habit of flattening a person's story into a list of accomplishments. Number ones, sold-out stadiums. Award show moments frozen in a highlight reel. But nobody actually lives inside a highlight reel. They live inside relationships, chance encounters, hero worship from a distance, and the quiet influence of people who never even knew they were teaching a lesson. That's the version of the story Stewart seems to want told now. So who are these 7 people? Let's get into it. Sam Cooke. Every origin story needs a beginning, and for Stewart, this is where it starts. Sitting beside a record player as a teenager, hearing a voice that felt almost too smooth to be real. Stewart has described discovering Sam Cooke as a turning point. Plenty of singers could hold a note. Plenty could belt out a chorus with raw power. But Cooke did something different. He made you feel like he was singing directly to you. One person in an empty room, not a stadium full of strangers. There was an effortlessness to it, like the song wasn't work at all, just something pouring out of him naturally. For a young Stewart still figuring out who he wanted to be as a vocalist, that was fascinating. He's talked about playing Cooke's records over and over, trying to crack the code. How does someone sound that relaxed, while carrying that much emotion in every line? He wasn't chasing an impression of Cooke. Nobody could pull that off. He was chasing an understanding of him. Years later, once his own voice started turning heads, Stewart realized just how much of what he'd absorbed from those quiet evenings had shaped his own instincts. It wasn't just the voice either. It was the elegance. Cooke never seemed to force anything. He could hold a room's attention without raising his volume, break your heart with a single soft phrase. That kind of restraint, Stewart says, is rarer than people think. He crossed paths with plenty of gifted singers over his career. Bigger ranges, flashier runs. But very few carried that same natural warmth Cooke had in spades. Even now, hearing one of those old songs pulls Stewart straight back to that bedroom, that record player, that kid who hadn't found his voice yet. In a lot of ways, Sam Cooke is the reason he eventually did. Ray Charles. If Sam Cooke taught Stewart about grace, Ray Charles taught him something entirely different: nerve. Stewart has spoken about becoming almost obsessed with Charles's records early in his career, and what grabbed him wasn't just the sound, it was the sheer freedom in it. Blues, gospel, soul, country, jazz. Charles blended it all together, like genre boundaries were somebody else's problem, not his. For a young musician trying to find his footing in an industry full of people telling him exactly what he should sound like, that was a revelation. Because let's be honest, The music business has never been short on opinions. Record executives have them. Critics have them. Even fans think they know best. But Charles seemed to operate on a completely different wavelength. He trusted his gut. If a song moved him, he sang it. If he wanted to try something nobody expected, he just did it. No permission required. Stewart has talked about watching old footage of Charles performing and being unable to look away. Not because he was putting on a show, not because he was chasing trends, but because he simply sat down and let the music do the talking. The honesty of it was so plain that audiences didn't have a choice but to follow along. What made the admiration run even deeper was knowing what Charles had overcome to get there. Life had thrown obstacles at him that would have flattened plenty of people. Instead of letting that bitterness win, he turned it into fuel. Instead of being defined by hardship, he defined himself on his own terms. Looking back after decades in the industry himself, Stewart has said that's the real lesson. Talent gets you noticed. Hard work keeps you in the room. But true originality, the willingness to just be yourself no matter who's watching, that's an entirely different level. Whenever self-doubt crept in during his own career, Stewart says he'd think of artists like Charles as a reminder. The performers people remember are usually the ones who refuse to color inside the lines. George Best. Long before sold-out tours and platinum records, there was a football-mad kid in North London who dreamed of playing for his favorite club. That love never went away, and it's a big part of why George Best made such an impression on him. What struck Stewart first wasn't just that Best was good. Plenty of players were good. It was that he was different. Best played football the way a great musician performs a song, full of imagination, unpredictability, flair. One second he'd be standing still, almost bored-looking, and the next, he'd glide past 3 defenders like they weren't even on the pitch. You genuinely couldn't guess what he'd do next, and that unpredictability was the whole thrill of watching him. In a lot of ways, Best was the first true rock star athlete. Before him, footballers were known for what they did on the pitch. Best became known for who he was. The hair, the swagger, the charisma that had people talking about him even when he wasn't playing. As someone who'd go on to live in the spotlight himself, Stewart understood that kind of attention intimately. The thrill of it, and the weight of it too. The two crossed paths over the years, and what stuck with Stewart was the natural charm underneath all those headlines. Best could apparently walk into a room and become the center of it without even trying. Of course, life wasn't always fair to him. Like a lot of hugely gifted people, Best carried burdens the public didn't always see, and watching some of those struggles play out in public was hard to witness, especially knowing just how extraordinary he was. But when Stewart thinks of George Best, his mind doesn't go to the scandals or the tabloid headlines. It goes to the joy. A footballer who made the game feel like magic, who inspired millions simply by being unapologetically himself. Very few athletes cross over into being artists. Best, in Stewart's eyes, was one of the rare ones who did. Elton John. Ask Stewart about his oldest friendships, and Elton John's name comes up almost immediately. It's easy to assume friendships in the music industry are simple, because everyone's speaking the same language. But the truth is, they're often complicated. Careers rise and fall unevenly. Egos creep in. Competition has a way of poisoning things that used to feel effortless. That's exactly why the relationships that survive decades mean so much. And somehow, this one has. Stewart remembers the early days, both of them still finding their footing in a music industry that was changing fast. Even then, there was something unmistakable about Elton. Walk into a room full of musicians, and you'd know exactly who he was, without needing an introduction. The talent was obvious, sure, but it was the drive that really set him apart. Most artists hope for success. Elton, by Stewart's account, seemed to expect greatness from himself, and then went out and worked relentlessly to get it. Over the decades, the two have shared plenty of laughs and, famously, more than a few jabs at each other's expense. That's part of the charm of a friendship that's lasted this long. You earn the right to tease someone once you've known them for 50 years. But underneath the humor is real respect. Stewart has watched Elton reinvent himself again and again, Watched him perform with the same fire decades into his career. Watched him keep creating, long after plenty of artists would have been happy coasting on their old hits. What Stewart says he admires most, though, isn't the fame. Plenty of people get famous. It's the loyalty. Those close to Elton know how deeply he cares about family, friends, and the causes that matter to him. Behind the bigger-than-life public persona is someone who's never stopped showing up for the people in his corner. And as the years go by, that's the thing Stewart says he values more than any hit song or sold-out arena. Because talent earns respect, but loyalty earns something deeper. Frank Sinatra. When Stewart was young, he assumed great singing was simply about having a great voice. Then he started really listening to Frank Sinatra, and that assumption fell apart completely. Sinatra didn't just sing lyrics, he told stories. Every line felt like part of a conversation happening in real time. Every pause felt deliberate, like he'd thought it through and decided exactly how long to let a moment breathe. He had a way of making a song feel like it had happened to him minutes before he stepped up to the mic, even if he'd sung it 1,000 times before. That had a massive impact on Stewart as a performer. Every singer is chasing the same thing, really. A genuine connection with the audience, a way to make people feel something real instead of just hearing pretty noise. Sinatra, in Stewart's estimation, nailed that better than almost anyone in history. Love, heartbreak, loneliness, hope, whatever the subject, you believed him completely. And belief, as Stewart puts it, is everything. As his own career developed, Stewart kept returning to Sinatra's recordings, not to copy him, but to understand him. How does someone turn a 3-minute song into what feels like a complete life story? Stewart's answer: honesty. Sinatra committed fully to every single word. No hesitation, no holding back. The way a great actor commits to a role rather than just reciting lines. Stewart has spent plenty of time in circles where Sinatra's name comes up, and the respect people had for him was extraordinary. Singers studying him, performers measuring themselves against him, and for good reason. He carried a kind of confidence that few people ever manage. When Sinatra walked onto a stage, there was no uncertainty in the room, nothing to prove. The audience trusted him because he trusted himself first. Even now, Stewart says he still finds new details in those old recordings, still marvels at how effortlessly Sinatra commanded a room. Of everyone who's influenced him vocally, Sinatra remains, in his words, the gold standard for interpreting a song. Ronnie Wood. Ask about the greatest friendships of his life, and Ronnie Wood's name lands right near the top. Before the fame became overwhelming, before the endless flights, interviews, and back-to-back tours, there was simply a group of musicians trying to make something worthwhile together. And Wood, by Stewart's account, was the guy who brought the energy into every room he walked into. Exhausted after a brutal night on the road? Somehow Wood would still find a way to get everyone laughing. That's part of why the friendship has lasted. A career in music is unpredictable by nature. One year you're on top of the world, the next you're wondering what's next. Through all of it, Wood always seemed to keep perspective. He loved the music, obviously, but he genuinely loved people too, and that never changed no matter how famous he got. Some of Stewart's favorite memories with Wood aren't from the stage or the studio at all. They're from the in-between moments. Long conversations, late-night jokes, stories that probably shouldn't be repeated. Those are the ones that stick. What Stewart admires most is that Wood never lost his enthusiasm. Even after decades in the business, he still approaches music like a kid picking up a guitar for the first time. Genuinely rare, considering how easy it is to grow cynical after that long in the industry. And then there's the resilience. Wood's faced his own battles over the years, difficult stretches where things could easily have gone a different way. He kept moving forward anyway, kept creating, kept finding reasons to smile. The public sees the guitarist, the famous face on stage. Stewart sees the friend who's been there through every high and low for half a century. And that, he says, is far harder to come by than fame ever was. David Bowie. And then there's the one at the very top of the list. The person whose imagination, in Stewart's words, seemed to have no ceiling at all. When they first met, neither of them had any real idea what their futures held. Just two young men chasing impossible dreams. Looking back, that's what Stewart remembers most clearly. Because even then, before the fame, before the world started calling him a genius, David Bowie already had something different about him. A restlessness. A curiosity that wouldn't sit still creatively. Most artists spend a career figuring out who they are. Bowie spent his career reinventing who he could become next. And Stewart says that took a kind of courage most people never have to summon. The music industry rewards repetition. Find something that works, and the pressure is to keep doing it forever. Bowie refused that entirely. Just when audiences thought they'd finally figured him out, he'd shift again, unbothered by confusing people, unafraid of failure, and, most importantly, unafraid of change. Stewart has described conversations with Bowie where his mind seemed to leap in directions nobody else in the room could follow. He wasn't only thinking about songs, he was thinking about art, fashion, culture, performance, storytelling, all of it feeding into everything else. Every corner of life was potential material. What impressed Stewart most wasn't Bowie's success, honestly. Plenty of talented people become successful. It was his refusal to compromise who he actually was. Bowie never seemed interested in fitting neatly inside anyone's expectations of him. He followed his instincts wherever they led, whether or not people understood it right away, and just kept moving forward regardless. When news broke of Bowie's death, it felt to Stewart, and to countless others across the music world, like an entire era had lost one of its brightest lights. That reaction didn't surprise him one bit. Bowie had been inspiring artists across generations for decades. But when Stewart thinks of him now, his mind doesn't go straight to the records or the accolades. It goes to that young dreamer he met all those years ago. The man who believed creativity shouldn't have limits. Who proved that being different could be your greatest strength. The common thread. Reflecting on all seven, Stewart has noted how wildly different each of them was. Sam Cooke taught him warmth. Ray Charles taught him to trust his own instincts. George Best showed him that talent could be its own kind of art. Elton John demonstrated what loyalty looks like across a lifetime. Frank Sinatra taught him how to tell a story through a song. Ronnie Wood showed him what real friendship costs and gives. And David Bowie proved, again and again, that creativity really doesn't have to have an edge. None of them inspired him in quite the same way. Some shaped his music. Some shaped how he sees the world. Some just inspired him by the sheer way they carried themselves through life. When you're young, Stewart has said, you tend to think success means rising above everyone else. The older he's gotten, the more he's come to believe it's actually the opposite. Success is about learning from the people around you, recognizing greatness when you see it, and staying grateful for everyone who helped shape the road you ended up walking. The lesson he keeps coming back to is a simple one. Talent might open the door, but character is what people actually remember. The songs eventually end. The crowds go home. The spotlight always moves on to someone else eventually. But the people who genuinely shape you, those stick around for good, long after the applause has faded and the last encore's been played. There's something oddly comforting in hearing a man with this kind of career say it so plainly. It would be easy for someone with that many records sold, that many sold-out nights, to measure a life purely in numbers. Instead, what comes through is almost the opposite instinct. A kind of gratitude that has nothing to do with charts or trophies at all. It's the gratitude of someone who got to watch greatness up close, more than once, and never stopped paying attention to what it actually looked like. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Who are the 7 people who shaped you? Not necessarily famous, not necessarily people you ever met, just the ones who, looking back, quietly changed the direction you were heading in. Take a second, think it over. If this got you reflecting on your own list, drop a comment and share a name or two. Someone else reading might need the reminder just as much as you did. And if you want more stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe.